The Independent is one of a limited number of productions written and directed by Stephen Kessler, who's probably best remembered for his directional work on 1997's National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation. Produced in the year 2000, The Independent follows Jerry Stiller as Morty Fineman, a big-shot B-movie filmmaker in the vein of Coleman Francis, Ed Wood and Roger Corman, as he battles against an increasing risk of bankruptcy to find the inspiration to create a new film to help him get out of his money hole and give him one last hurrah in the industry before retirement. At first he attempts to sell his films to a film company who offer him $8 a pound for his works, which is apparently very good in this industry. But in the end, he ends up recruiting his daughter Paloma, played wonderfully by the deadpan Janeane Garofalo. As the film progresses, following Morty in his attempts, we are also treated to an overview of Morty's career in the form of several talking head pieces, including a nice cameo from Roger Corman himself. Eventually, Morty finds his inspiration in the form of a news report about a serial killer who's been awarded the Guinness World Record for the most murders. And so he begins the pre-production on what is to be his swan song.
This is my vault where I keep the things I love. My posters, my awards, my films. Some of the nicest things that have happened to me. This is a time capsule filled with garbage from 1971. I gave it to theater owners to promote one of my films. This is a device I invented called a cut one. You know, a director has to say cut all day. Makes him very tired. With this, you just... Cut, cut, cut! Still works. Oh, my God. I couldn't bear to bury him, so I did this to him. I love you, boy.
A lot of people say Morty was a hack.
Right.
I don't agree with that. They say he cheapened filmmaking and he cut corners and he made cheap, independent, low-budget films. I say, yeah, but they're great films. Hot Buttered Fingers? I don't know one person that doesn't love that film. And, 12 Angry Men and a Baby is a classic.
To get it out of the way from the start, I think personally the biggest issue that this film has is that it really doesn't know what format it wants to present itself as. With 50% of the film being a dyed-in-the-wool homage to Christopher Guest's works such as A Mighty Wind or Waiting for Guffman, and the remaining 50% being played as a traditional feel-good comedy film with a few nods to the likes of Mel Brooks. Neither of these formats are particularly bad for this type of film, it works perfectly well as either of these, but blending the two tones together really just left me sort of feeling a lack of consistency, at least in terms of direction. I think of the two, I actually would have preferred the more traditional narrative, with talking heads moments cutting in occasionally, similar to Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, rather than a full-on mockumentary. Though realistically, while it does lose a few brownie points for this inconsistency, it hardly ruins the film. The cinematography is also fairly standard for a film of this time. There isn't really a tremendous amount of unique or interesting compositions, but it successfully creates the illusion in the documentary parts of it actually being a documentary, and the more filmic sections are nicely presented and flow smoothly with a reasonable use of composition and shots to show us how to feel rather than telling us how to feel. The actual script is surprisingly very entertaining. There were several moments where I audibly laughed out loud, and the closest tonally I could place this film would probably be something like Best in Show, with maybe just a dash of the producers thrown in for good measure. The pacing is nice and there's some decent wordplay jokes sprinkled throughout, and we're equally treated to several clips and trailers from Morty's old films, most of which are absolutely hilarious. My personal two favourites being Christ for the Defence and A Whale of a Cop, both of which are just surreal and silly enough to not be overbearing. They're also surprisingly well shot and really try to keep in the period to the time at which the films would have been produced. I'm not saying they're perfect, some of them look a little over cheap for what they are, but from a direction and editing perspective, they're all pretty much spot on. In short, this script is just the right blend of funny moments, emotional scenes and surrealness to not become overbearing, And I think one of the biggest reasons that this balance is achieved is down purely to the dynamic between Stiller and Garofalo. This quite simply is a role Jerry Stiller absolutely owns. His personification of Morty Fineman feels almost like it was tailored specifically for him. He uses charisma and character throughout and comes across as genuinely believable and mostly likeable in his struggle to get his last success. Garofalo as well is on excellent form as his long-suffering daughter who has to put up with her artist dad sometimes at the cost of a rational decision on how his career is going to pan out. She plays it completely straight and you genuinely can believe her deadpan reactions to some of the ridiculous situations Morty gets himself into. The extras in this film are also fairly decent. In fact, the casting for this production is pretty much flawless as far as I saw. There were maybe one or two slightly wobbly performances, but again, nowhere near enough for me to point at them and claim they're any kind of fundamental issue. The Independent was released completely bare bones on DVD in 2001 by ILC Studios. It sadly hasn't received a Blu-ray release though. Print quality on the DVD, while presented only in 4:3, is decent enough compared to some of the transfers I've seen. It's also absolutely dirt cheap at the moment, with prices as low as a single penny on Amazon.co.uk, and I highly recommend you consider checking this film out. It's by no means a hysterical production, but the fact that so little information about this film exists online, and the fact that so few people seem to have seen it, is almost criminal to me. The Independent is a highly underrated feel-good comedy, and I honestly can't believe that I hadn't heard about it until recently. Nor can I believe that this film isn't big on the cult circuit, as it really is quite funny. It just falls short of being as good as some of the better Chris Guest films, but to be honest, if I can mention this film in the same sentence as some of Chris Guest's work, I think that in itself must make it worthy of some kind of praise. It's by no means a perfect film, but the imperfections in themselves act almost like an affectionate tribute to the films that made Morty who he is. I highly recommend you go out and find a copy of this film. It's definitely worth your time.